City of Arnhem in the Netherlands. It's a small town in the east part of the Netherlands. Maybe you know it from the Second World War when it was a bridge too far. And now we hope it's a bridge to cross to a new sustainable energy future. In Arnhem we cooperate in this program Energy Made in Arnhem with all our businesses in Arnhem. It's about 100 businesses who have the same goals on sustainable energy as the city. We also cooperate with the city region, Arnhem-Nijmegen, which has about 750,000 inhabitants, and the province of Gelderland, which is the largest province in the Netherlands, and which has 2 million inhabitants. I will try to take you through the current state of charging infrastructure in the Netherlands generally, and more in detail in Arnhem, what we did in Arnhem. A bit about the future, and maybe when we have time for it, the context in the province of Gelderland. The charging infrastructure in the Netherlands is a sort of two-way street, because at first it was approached top-down from the national government and the grid companies, but they soon found out that actually the municipalities or the cities, they own the public space, so they decide who's going to put something in the public space. And bottom up, there was an incentive to work on this, because I'll show you in a minute. In the Netherlands, the charging poles, and that's very important to remember, the charging stations are actually following the cars, because there are a lot of cars, electric cars in the Netherlands, and not as much charging points. First, the role of the national government. Of course, they set the goals, which are equal for all of us here. We think that in 5 years' time, there will be 200,000 electric vehicles in the Netherlands, which is about 3% of the total amount of vehicles. Maybe you don't know, but the Netherlands has about 16 million inhabitants. And it's of course a very small country, so you can say it's a very densely populated country. This is the current facts on the electric vehicles in the Netherlands. As you can see, in 2013 and the first part of 2014, we gone up to 35,000 electric vehicles in the Netherlands. And this small glitch, you could say, at the turning of the year, had something to do with the tax measures, because there was the national government changed the tax measures, and everybody was thinking, oh, well, now nobody will buy these cars. But as you can see, it has picked up again, and it's still growing, because these are the figures of April 2014. So 35,750 electric vehicles, but only almost 9,000 charging stations. So that's what we are facing now in the Netherlands. Small sidestep to the tax measures, because Marianne was also talking about tax measures in Oslo or in Norway. Well, in Holland we have the same tax measures, otherwise you wouldn't have seen this exponential growth of electric vehicles. Well, this is a small list, and I even forgot a few, because businesses in the Netherlands do not pay value-added tax, and they don't. And for electric vehicles, you don't have to pay the other taxes which we have on cars, which are also very extensive, you could say. So those are tax measures, but also the 0% adding to your salary when you drive a business car in the Netherlands. As a lease driver or as a private businessman or private business, you have to add the part of the value of the car to your salary, and of course the salary is then taxed. Well, for an electric car last year it was 0%, and they changed it now in 2014 to 4 and 7%, which is 4% for fully electric cars and 7% for hybrids. And this change was responsible for this small glitch in the growth, I think. Well, apart from that, last year they also had tax deductions from the rapid depreciation of their car, of the investment in the car, which means that normally when you buy a car, you can only depreciate it in 5 or 6 years' time. But when you have an electric vehicle, you're allowed to depreciate it in even 1 year or 2 years, depending on whether it's a full electric or a hybrid car. So that means, what I said there, means less profit and also less tax, of course. There were also national and local subsidies, especially in the bigger cities like Amsterdam, Rotterdam. They had subsidies for electric vehicles and for charging points for businesses. We didn't have that. And we have a national subsidy for taxis and vans, which was in the bigger cities, and Arnhem, it was 5,000 euros per car. But all these things taken together, you can see a Volvo which was only available in the Netherlands last year and not in Sweden, because they shipped them all to Holland. You can get an advantage of about 30,000 euros for this car. And also it's the same for the Mitsubishi Outlander, which I think costs about 40,000 euros or something. So a businessman only paid 10 to 11,000 euros for this car. So you can imagine it was very popular last year. But of course, only the businesses benefited from this, and other people in the Netherlands said, what is the Dutch government doing? And there was some discussion about, well, should we put that much money in these cars when the rest of the inhabitants of the Netherlands can't benefit from it? So it's actually we're stimulating Volvo in the Netherlands for this purpose. But on the other hand, of course, it also helped the local governments to achieve their sustainability goals. So that's the upside of it. So this is the player, the EV drivers, which are at the moment are still the least drivers and the small business companies. But the NGOs in the Netherlands, the green NGOs, they are trying to find ways to also make this available for private people. So they are now working on, for instance, a very low lease price for instance, for a Nissan Leaf, so that private people can also lease an electric car. Another part of the national government plays is we are now talking in the Netherlands, together with the car manufacturers. We don't have car manufacturers, of course, but people who import the cars who are manufactured elsewhere. We are talking about a Green Deal. That's what is a sort of model we use in the Netherlands. It's a sort of polder model, you could say. We use this to bring together funds and knowledge and try to change legislation on this, on the deployment of charging infrastructure. It's not signed yet. We're still discussing what you call it, the conditions and stuff like that, and who can use these funds for setting up charging stations, and who can't, and who will put in how much money. That's still under discussion. But when this is signed, all the municipalities in the Netherlands can get money from this Green Deal to put up charging stations. Because this is a very this is an essential slide for my presentation, because this is how it is developing. A few years ago, only the big cities and the grid companies were putting up charging stations. The grid companies also did it in smaller cities. But then the national government said, oh, wait a minute, the grid companies are not allowed by law to do this. So they had to stop somewhere in 2012. And then there was a large gap. Nobody knew what to do. And at that moment we thought, well, I have a lot of questions from inhabitants of the city of Arnhem, because there are a lot of electric vehicles there. They want their charging points. And maybe it's a good moment now to tell you that in the Netherlands the charging stations are not just put anywhere in the city, no, they are placed somewhere in the vicinity of the one who is using the car. So they ask the local government, hey, I need a charging point for my car, please put it in front of my house. And that's what we actually did the last couple of years. So that's how the charging stations are deployed in the Netherlands until now. And that's because we are still following the cars, of course. There are a lot of cars and not enough charging points. There are also, especially also in the city of Arnhem, we also have some what we call strategic points, and that are charging stations which are placed in the center, very high visibility for, well, just to sell them as it were. So in this, in 2012, when the grid companies stopped putting up charging stations in the Netherlands, and nobody was doing anything, and I got requests all the time. So what we did then is, well, what shall we do? We don't have any money. We're a small city. We have not enough money to fully pay for this charging station. So what we did is we put out a concession on the market, and a concession means, well, we have the public space. Any company who has a low price for the charging can put up his charging stations, and gets an exclusive right for a year to put up charging stations. So there were some 4 companies in the Netherlands who reacted to that, and the one with the lowest price, which was a daughter of a former grid company actually, but well, it doesn't matter. They won, and they came up with a price of 41 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's quite expensive, you could say, because it's not competitive with diesel. When you look at how many energy you need for instance, 100 kilometers of driving. So then what we did is we went to the national government and told them, well, we want to lower this price. Can you help us? And now we're paying 2,000 euros per charging station to bring down the charging price to 33 cents, which is sort of competitive with diesel. And we had to do it in this way, because if we just gave the money to this company, it would be, what do you call it, staatssteun. You would be helping, and you can't do that as a government. So what we did is we lowered the price, so the inhabitants or the EV drivers benefit from this. So that's how we brought down the price, and then at the moment we're putting up charging stations in this model in Arnhem, and we're going towards about 100 charging points this year, and you have to remember that Arnhem is only a city of 150,000 inhabitants. At the moment, we're also working on a concession, the same model, for the province of Gelderland, and Gelderland has 2 million inhabitants. And today, the prices, or the subscriptions should be coming in. So this evening I will know who has won that one. And then in Arnhem, because I already had a concession, I can choose, well, what's the better price? No, I'll choose the one I already had, and I'll extend it 1 year, or I'll choose the one of Gelderland and go on with that. So we have a choice. But the point is, we only pay 10 to 20% of the total costs of this charging station, and of course the people who are driving EVs, they only pay when they are charging. You don't have to pay for a charging station which is placed somewhere in the vicinity of their house. But there are also municipalities in the Netherlands who say, well, we don't want to do anything with charging, and maybe we're thinking about giving them a permit and for a company who wants to put up the charging stations. But then you don't have any direction, you can't direct the price, so you have no idea what price will be asked there. So I'm not convinced this is a better model, but when it will prove to be better, of course I will adopt it, because our concession is for 1 year of placing charging stations and 8 years of exploitation. That means after a year I need to find another party who will put in the charging stations in my city. Okay, the big discussion in the Netherlands, of course, and maybe in your countries as well, is there a positive business case of charging stations? And before we put out this concession, we made this calculation. That's also the reason why we had an exploitation period of 8 years, because we thought with the current prices they could, get back their investment in 8 years. And with this price, and we brought the money we paid for this charging stations is then of course used to lower the initial investment and thereby making it profitable for the companies. Not all people in the Netherlands are convinced it works like this, because there are still people who say, oh, now you have to pay 8,000 euros for these charging stations and then it will be okay. But we'll see. It's what they say in England, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, so we'll see how it works out. something else I have to say about this? No, I don't think so. Now, we also have, I already mentioned the province of Gelderland, which do not really play a role at this moment, but they should play a role because they are more than 50% owner of the grid company in our area. But with the concession we're doing now, they agreed to take up the role of helping all the smaller municipalities with the deployment of the charging points. So I'm missing here something, I think. The municipalities, they are in charge of their public space, of course, but they don't have the money and they don't have the knowledge, so the regional government should help them with that. That's what we said here underneath. This is the Netherlands with the province of Gelderland highlighted here, which has 2 million inhabitants. And when this concession, which is due today, will be granted to one of the companies, the regional government will help the municipalities further in this process and hopefully enhance the amount of charging stations. Now back to Arnhem. This is of course well, it's same everywhere, so I'll skip this. So in Arnhem we had this concession with 41 cents per kilowatt hour and brought it down to 33 cents per kilowatt hour. But what I didn't mention is that we gave the company who was granted this concession a lot of freedom in how they wanted to charge, how they charge money, I mean, how they wanted to make the people pay for charging. And what we agreed upon is, of course, we had to agree upon the policy on locations. Where do you put them, where will you not put them? But also, how do you pay for it? Because maybe you know that in the Netherlands, when you have a card of a service provider, you can pay at any charging station in the Netherlands. That's not really a problem, but we also wanted to make it possible for visitors